Hi everyone, it's Danny from Orchid Nature, and today we'll discuss about how to care for Psychopsis orchids. Now, the Psychopsis orchid is a fairly new orchid to have in our collection. It became more available than it used to be, and even though it's recent, the Psychopsis orchid was obtained in cultivation actually a lot of years ago, so it's not a new thing. But in time, people reproduced this orchid in cultivation, and now we have an abundance of this beautiful, gorgeous orchid that looks like a butterfly. Now, before this orchid was classified in a family of its own, it used to belong to the Oncidium family, and it's pretty obvious why. If we look at the plant, we will see that it produces pseudobulbs, just like an Oncidium, and then a big leaf from on top of the pseudobulb. And actually, the care for this orchid is pretty similar to that of an Oncidium orchid. Regarding light requirements, this orchid likes to have bright light, not necessarily direct sunshine, maybe a few hours in the morning, but never in the noon when the sun is the strongest. Other than that, if you can provide bright shade, it would be perfect for it. Some varieties of Psychopsis orchids have beautiful mottled leaves. Now, they will show this pattern only if they receive adequate light. If they don't, the leaves will be green, but it's not the case with all varieties. The usual color of the leaf is pretty dark, so if you see your Psychopsis has this color on its leaves, it is receiving adequate light. Darker than this might indicate that you're not providing enough light. Psychopsis orchids like intermediate temperatures, so don't go below 18 degrees Celsius at night during winter time, and in the summertime don't go above 28 degrees Celsius. They can withstand extremes for short periods of time, but it's not healthy for the orchid, so try to provide between 18 and 28 degrees Celsius. Psychopsis orchids don't necessarily like to go dry for too long. This is why in my environment I use a mixture between bark and sphagnum moss, and it seems to absolutely like it. Now, this mixture is very good in my summertime, which can be dry and very warm, but in the winter time, when it's humid and cold, the bark will provide the air necessary for the roots to properly grow. So I believe in a temperate climate, a mixture between sphagnum and bark or even coconut husk can do good for this orchid. Try to adapt your watering so that the orchid doesn't stay completely bone dry for too long. When you see the media is almost completely dry, give it a good water and it should be just fine. An indication of underwatering is the wrinkles that will appear on the pseudobulbs if the orchid is dehydrated. So if you see that the small pseudobulbs start to get some wrinkles, it's your cue to water this orchid. The roots of this orchid are very similar to those of an Oncidium orchid. They should be white and have a green tip if they're in growing mode. If they're not, they should just be white. If your orchid has very dark brownish roots, then maybe it's a good idea to unpot it and take a look at the potting medium. Maybe it's going bad and maybe it's suffocating the roots. Now, regarding repotting, there's this rumor that Psychopsis orchids don't really like repotting, and I find it to be very untrue. But just like any other orchid, if your orchid is suffering, it will take longer for it to adjust to a new potting medium. But if you see that the old potting medium is starting to go bad, the best thing you can do is actually to repot your orchid. Now, my Psychopsis orchid was repotted 2 months ago, and already I have roots coming out of the bottom, and the orchid is blooming and doing just fine. And not only that, but it's producing a brand new little shoot here. And this is a sign that everything goes well. So don't be afraid to repot your Psychopsis, especially if it really needs it. The rumors are just not true. Usually you can repot every 2 years to keep the media fresh. If you just purchase your Psychopsis, you can repot it straight away, especially if you believe the media is breaking down or it might not be to your liking. Psychopsis orchids are sequential bloomers. This means that this flower spike can produce multiple flowers for a few years, so never cut this flower spike. Usually when the flower is done and it will dry out, a new bud will appear in about a few weeks and it will bloom once again. This is why you can repot your Psychopsis orchid whenever you want. Even if you repot a Psychopsis orchid, don't cut the flower spike because it can take a great deal of time before this orchid will send out a new flower spike. If you have a very healthy Psychopsis orchid, don't cut the flower spike. The only instance where I would cut the flower spike is if your orchid is very suffering and it doesn't have any roots. In order to promote energy towards the roots and new pseudobulbs production, I would cut the flower spike and I would just be patient. But if your orchid is healthy, repot it like it is and don't cut the flower spike. It will start to bloom again once it gets adjusted to your environment. And in my case, that was super fast. So Psychopsis orchids are really not hard orchids to keep. I fertilize this orchid regularly along with my other orchids, but because it is a sequential bloomer, I alternate. Every 2 weeks I use a different fertilizer. What I mean is I alternate the high nitrogen fertilizer with the bloom booster, so every 2 weeks this orchid is receiving one of those fertilizers. Now in the Psychopsis family, there isn't much variation when it comes to color. Most Psychopsis look like this, and they have a mixture between this beautiful yellow and this orangish rusty color. But some Psychopsis orchids, also called albinos, are completely yellow and they are super beautiful. But other than that, you'll probably not find any other color variations. But that's okay, it just makes it special. Okay, so this is about it on the basic care for Psychopsis orchids. I really love this orchid and I think it can do great even for beginners. Just as long as you treat it almost like an Oncidium orchid, give it bright light, good watering, good fertilizing, and a good intermediate temperature, it should be just fine. So if I didn't cover anything, just leave me a comment in the comment section below and I'll get back to you with my answer. Also, if you want to see other types of videos, give me your suggestions in a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like what you see. Also visit orchidnature.com for more forums, photos, and good orchid information. I'll see you next time. Thank you for joining. Bye!